Hello there, mathematicians. My name is Ms. Peliquin, and together we're going to learn about fractions. I love fractions. Don't you? I'm so excited. First, let's talk about what a fraction is. A fraction represents equal parts or shares of a whole. A fraction has two parts, the numerator and the denominator. The numerator represents how many parts of a whole you have, or the top number. And the denominator is the total number of parts that make up the whole, or the bottom number. Now, if we were to write a fraction with numbers, this is how it would look. We have the number 1 on the top, and that's the numerator. We have the number 2 on the bottom, and that's the denominator. We also represent 1/2 by using words. 1/2. Now let's take a look at our models. We have a circle here. We have a circle here that is partitioned into 2 equal parts. Wait a second. What does it mean to partition? To partition means to split or divide the whole equally. So if we look at this circle, again, it is partitioned into 2 equal parts with a vertical line. Vertical means up and down. If I were to shade half of this circle, like this, I would say 1/2 of my circle is shaded. I could write it as 1/2 with numbers, or I could write it as 1/2 with words. Now, we can look at this circle here. This circle is very similar. Instead of being partitioned with a vertical line, this circle is partitioned with a horizontal line. Now, it still represents the same thing. This is the same shape, it's just partitioned a different way. This is still 1/2. If I shaded this, this is still 1/2. Now let's look at our rectangles here. We have 3 different representations of a rectangle partitioned into 2 equal parts. Now, this rectangle is partitioned with a horizontal line across. This rectangle is partitioned with a vertical line straight down the middle. This last rectangle is partitioned with a diagonal line right across the rectangle. If we look at all 3 of these rectangles, they are all partitioned into 2 equal parts. So they are each representing 1/2. If I shaded in 1/2 of this rectangle, I would still represent this shape as 1/2 or 1/2. Now say I were to shade more than 1/2. Say I were to shade both halves. Oops. Say I were to shade both halves. 1, 2. Both halves are shaded. Let's make that a little bit darker. 1, 2. Now I have 2 halves that are shaded. 2 halves. We would write that with a V, halves. Half or halves. Here we would write 1/2. But here we have 2 halves shaded. So we would write this as 2 halves instead of 1/2. Now, we have 2 halves, but the whole shape is shaded. So, we can say that 2 halves equals 1 whole. Why can we say that? Again, let's look at our rectangle. 2 halves are shaded. So now the entire rectangle is shaded to make one whole. We can do the same for circles. We have our 1/2 shaded, but if we were to shade both halves, we would now have our whole circle shaded. So we would write that as 2 halves equals 1 whole. And we can do the same for this circle. So, again, let's look at how we can represent 1/2. We can represent 1/2 with numbers, like this. The number 1 with a line in the middle, and the number 2 below it. The number 1 is the numerator, the number 2 is the denominator. Now, we can also represent 1/2 with words, like this. 1/2. Now, if we had both halves shaded like this, we would write this as 2 halves, or we could write 2 halves, or we could write 1 whole. Let's take a look at these shapes. We have a circle and 2 rectangles. Looking at these shapes, we can see that each shape is partitioned into 2 parts. But are these parts equal? Let's take a look. Looking at this circle, is this partitioned into 2 equal parts? No, it's not. We cannot say that this circle represents the fraction 1/2. Looking at this rectangle, it is partitioned into 2 parts. Here's one part, here's another part. But is this rectangle partitioned equally? No, it's not. So we cannot say that this represents 1/2. Another rectangle, this is partitioned with a vertical line, but it is still not partitioned equally. So we cannot say that this shape represents 1/2. It's very important to remember that in order for the fraction to be represented properly, you must partition the shape equally to have 2 equal parts.